Alright, so in this video, we're going to talk about my 124 SNS Dyna Lowrider S. Let's check it out. Alright, what's going on YouTube? FXDLS Brooklyn is back in the building. And you all are catching me from a very special moment here. Those of you who have been following me since 2016 have seen this bike go through many transformations, and this is probably the most radical transformation we have put this bike through at this point. So what you're looking at is the culmination of 6 years of planning and ideating of what this bike could be and the direction that it might go in, and this is the final result. I don't really see us taking this bike in a different direction at this point than where it's currently at. So you all know I'm one of the rarities out there who is a original owner of a Dyna Lowrider S, a 2016 Dyna Lowrider S to be exact. As far as I'm concerned, that's the only real Lowrider S out there. I'm just kidding, I love you, my Softail people. But the situation is when the new Lowrider ST dropped this year, 2022 Lowrider ST, I had to make a decision because after doing my last trip last year, I had hit 50,000 miles on my 110. And it was at a point where I was gonna have to do some serious rebuilding or replace the engine completely. And I was gonna have to do a lot of work in order to keep that bike running at that point. So basically I had to make a decision if I would get with modern times, go with the Lowrider ST, or if I would just stay true to my 2016 Dyna Lowrider S and really put the time and the money and the patience into making this bike reborn and something special. So honestly, not gonna lie, Lowrider ST is a hot bike. I'm a big supporter of that bike. I'm happy for anyone that went in that direction. But for me, just the amount of miles that I've put on this bike and the amount of memories I've had on this bike for over 6 years at this point, I just wasn't ready to let it go. And just the fact that these bikes are becoming more and more special because they only made them for a year and a half. Again, I just wasn't ready to let that go, and I wasn't ready to go in a different direction. And I don't know, I just have too much love for this bike at this point. So I just said to myself, all right, if I'm not going to go with modern times, if I'm not going to go with the Lowrider ST, which so many of you on here thought I was going to do and encouraged me to do, what am I going to do to make this bike still relevant and to make this bike keep up with modern times? So in its perfected state, as far as I'm concerned, we did a couple really major upgrades that I think are worth noting. As always, we kept this bike as New York as possible, and what that means is we are coming in with a classic New York flame job as well as performance being front and center. So why don't we start with the high performance on this thing and talk about where we landed in terms of performance, because I did talk about, I kind of ran through that 110 Screaming Eagle engine, so I knew I was going to have to do some motor work. So first and foremost, the thing that I think is worth talking about first is 100% this 124 SNS insane motor that we decided to go with. Now, you all know my story. I used to have a Dyna that had a 116 SNS, and I actually got rid of it just because I thought the amount of power was completely unnecessary. So you're probably watching this and you're like, what is What is wrong with this dude? Is he confused? What is happening here? So my friends will tell you is shortly after I sold that bike, and it was a reasonable thing to do, I just started to really miss the over-the-top performance. Again, it's not necessary, especially for New York City, especially for the riding I'm doing. 116 was not necessary, but there was just this part of me that really missed it, and I had a lot of fun just having the over-the-top power. So I kind of said to myself, if I'm gonna really make this bike an heirloom bike, if this is a bike that's gonna stay with me forever, stay with my family forever, I'm gonna go as big as reasonably possible. And for me, that was the 124. And yeah, there's a lot I could tell you about that just off the bat. It's gonna be a separate video. I don't wanna spend too much time on it. But yeah, the rumors are true. It's a monster motor. It's insane. Honestly, you know, I'm not taking this thing on a track. I'm probably not running it for the purpose that it's made for, but I'll tell you that off the bat, it's an insane amount of fun. So yeah, I can't even take this bike back to New York City or Brooklyn at this point because there is a 1,000 to 2,000 mile break-in period where we have to be pretty gentle on this thing. I'm not going to be going over 3,000 RPMs for that amount of time. I know everyone has a different idea of what the break-in should be, but honestly, I'm just kind of following the S&S service manual at this point for this thing, and I do want this motor to last as long as possible. Once it's broken in, obviously I'm not going to baby it, but if I am going to have any issues with it, I don't want it to be because I didn't break it in properly. So if I bring it to the city, you all know, you've seen plenty of the city riding I do. There's a lot of lane splitting. There's a lot of stop and go. The bike is going to get really hot out there. It's just not the best idea right now while we are breaking it in to bring it into the city. So right now it's going to live in places that are far from the city, like my parents' house over here that's in the suburbs. And really it's a situation where I'm just going to be riding my FXR or my DX and then pulling this bike to do miles where there won't be stop and go, where I know I'm not going to be hitting traffic, where I could very, very gently break in this engine properly. So again, I don't want to say like too much about it at this point because again, I'm still in the break-in phase. You know, I haven't gotten on it, but my first impressions are the thing is absolutely insane. Nobody needs this much power, myself included. But again, I wanted to really, 6 years later, make this build something really special. And you know, we talk about performance dynas all the time, so this is true performance, this is true power. It's not going to get too much better than this. And at the end of the day, if you pull up next to me with your factory 117 Milwaukee 8, I want to have something that can make you feel a little bit insecure. Again, I'm just kidding, y'all. It's nothing but love for y'all. So the other elephant in the room is probably this paint job. Yeah, this was again a job that was in the works for years. I met Jace at Indian Larry a couple of years ago, and we've been kind of talking ever since about a job that we could do. So I had a conversation with him, told him that I wanted to keep it New York, but I also wanted to make it radically different than what was on there before. So you know, you can't get that much further than the classic Lowrider-S black and gold and doing something like this, but I still wanted to maintain some of the true Lowrider-S traits. So you still have some black and gold on there, but again, you have primarily that birch white paint job. And it's probably hard to see in the video, but it is birch white. So that was what was on a lot of the police bikes. That was like some of the older white that they used, which has like a little bit of cream in it. It's not necessarily a pearl white, but I've always liked that. I've always liked a white that's like kind of closer to a classic cream from the 80s. You know, like I said, it is a fast life paint job, so obviously we had to paint a Simpson helmet along with it. There's a lot I could tell you about this helmet. That's not what this video is about, so I'll do a separate video just telling you about what we did with this helmet, with this fast life paint job. So probably the other thing that you noticed is also we did put lowers on this bike. This was something I wanted to do for a while. The biggest reason is actually for a purpose-built job here. For the road trips, when it would rain, my boots and legs would get soaked all the time. Having these lowers is going to really help with the elements on the road trips. So yeah, lowers was something that we wanted to do for a while, and that's it. Finally made it happen. And also just aesthetically, I've always really liked the look of these Dyna builds with the lowers included. So again, that was something I wanted to do for a while, and that was it. But yeah, you know, sent the tins out to Texas. You know, Jace came through with me. He really took my ideas and brought them to life in a way that I wanted it to happen. Threw in some FX DLS Brooklyn touches in there. We got the PMA representing the bad brains. And And then of course we got the signature stay low over here on the windshield. And it was really a pleasure to work with the Fast Life Garage. They kind of kept me updated, communication was awesome, and I really do think I got what I paid for, and I couldn't be any happier. I'm really glad I went with them. As we keep it performance oriented, there is probably something worth, I mean, this pipe has been on here for a long time at this point, but these pipes are becoming more and more special. If y'all follow Fab 28, you know that they've had some issues ever since the pandemic. I think they're slowly starting to rebuild, but I'm talking about this thing being a classic New York build, so you got to be representing the Peter Gunn Special on here, which is a very rare pipe to be running at this point. But again, shout out to Fab 28. You know, they are starting production again on a couple models, and I'm glad that I have a special pipe here that's really hard to get now. Continuing with performance, you know I'm running Öhlins on my FXDX. Like I said, on this build, I wanted to go over the top extreme performance, so you're not going to get better than the Öhlins Blackline, and we're running 13-inch on this. Breaking it down to things that are more subtle, I did choose the handguards that do not have the signal cutouts. I took those bullet signals off. I just wanted to clean up the dash a little bit, which again, talking about being subtle, that means that we put these little LED strips from Moon's MC right here on the fairing itself. And again, I've never really seen anyone do that, but I really like the placement of putting those there because it's kind of reminiscent of the reflectors or some of the lights that you see on the FXRP builds. And I think it's a really cool throwback to that in a more trim and low profile way. Other things that are not so obvious, it's going to be kind of hard to show you this, but talking about performance, obviously we're running a monster motor on this thing, so I did upgrade the motor mounts. We went with Big Bear chopper motor mounts in the front and the back. So literally with those motor mounts, this motor isn't going anywhere, which is insane for how insanely violent this motor is. And I knew that from the 116. I remember how much that thing would violently shake the bike and would break things on the bike because of that. So I wanted to make sure that if we're gonna run a monster motor, we should make sure that we are properly situating it. And I've never had any issues with this bike in terms of the Dyna wobble, but now this thing is locked in so well at this point. So again, if I was going to go that big on the motor, I wanted to make sure that it had proper motor mounts. And again, we went with Big Bear front and back. So again, talking about things that maybe you wouldn't notice, this was always a joke. Mike over at O'Tools would always laugh about this, how I changed so many things on this bike, but the thing I never changed was the fuel caps. We finally changed the fuel caps. I took the stock ones off. I grew up and I went with those flush black ones. So changed those up. Those are on there now. And yeah, that was a really subtle change, but a change nonetheless. If you followed my Sturgis footage, you know that I put 30,000 miles on my old chain to the point where I almost destroyed my bike for running on a chain for that long. So obviously we replaced the chain, replaced the sprockets, so we are fresh to go for a new season. And then working our way down to the end, as you'll notice, with this motor, it's gonna get hot, so we installed the ultra cool, little bit more beefy oil cooler here to kind of help when this thing gets hot. So, you know, I had, I think, 40,000 miles on my old oil cooler. It was time for that to go anyway. So again, new oil cooler for the new motor, and hopefully this will help out a little bit. And I guess the last thing is, you know, with changing the motor mounts, we did have to change the crash bar. So again, we are running a brand new Bung King crash bar that is set to fit with the Big Bear motor mounts. And again, I needed a new crash bar anyway. The other one had plenty of use on it, so it was time to upgrade that for me anyway. So I hope I'm not missing anything. I'm sure I'm missing some things, but that's pretty much the lowdown on what we did. Again, this is probably the most radical change this bike has seen. This is the happiest I've been with this bike in my entire time with it in the 6 years. And I know you're probably saying, yeah, that's because it's new and it's fresh. But no, honestly, like, I'm probably happier with this than the day I actually bought it brand new in 2016. It's essentially a brand new bike. And again, the culmination of a lot of hard work over the years is kind of how I got here. This did not just happen in one weekend. This is the progress of over 6 years of hard work and just thinking what this bike could be. I'd be remiss if I didn't give some shout outs for the people that made this possible. So a major shout out to Mike over at O'Tools for taking care of all the motor work and doing this properly. You know, he really took his time to do it right, you know, doing things like getting these O2 sensors situated properly for this pipe. As you can see, running these hoses here to make that work, and a lot of really small, subtle things that he took his time to do just to make sure that this motor was installed properly. Huge shout out to Jace over at Fast Life in Texas for again working with me on this and just being really cool and being psyched about it and taking your time to make it special with the amount of work that you had in front of you. So thank you, Jace. I'll do a separate video just about the experience of working with Fast Life and what it takes to get a bike painted like this, if anyone wants to do that. So again, I'll have a separate video coming up on that. Major shout out to Gerard and the good folks over at Rolling Thunder for taking the time to put this bike back together with the fresh painted tins and get things situated properly. There's a lot of subtle things that had to be done, such as cutting out these lowers to make the crash bar fit, also making sure that it cleared the oil cooler, a whole bunch of little subtle things, and they did it flawlessly. So again, shout out to Rolling Thunder Cycles. They've been working on this bike since 2016. Huge shout out to my dad, the road captain. I couldn't have done this without him. He was pivotal in being able to get the trailer and be able to trail this thing up to O'Toole's in the Catskills, or trail it back down to Long Island to get the work done, and helping me get the tins shipped out. So huge shout out to my dad. Couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for supporting this from day one. And yeah, man, he looks pretty good on this bike, right? And finally, a major shout out to all of you all who subscribe to this content and, you know, keep these things and these builds exciting. And major shout out to all the folks on my Patreon for supporting this type of content and supporting bike builds like this. So that's it. We have a very exciting riding season ahead of us. Obviously, a lot of you are going to say that's a show bike. That bike belongs in shows and magazines. I disagree. I'm going to destroy this bike. The purpose of this and thinking about some Zen Buddhism is I created something beautiful. I worked hard to get to this point. It's not going to sit in a garage. It's not going to collect dust. I am going to destroy this thing over the next couple of years, and that's going to bring me the most amount of joy. So you're seeing it in its most pristine state right now. It's not going to look like this in a year. Obviously, I plan to get after it. Obviously, I'm going to put heavy miles on it this season. It's not sitting in the garage, so it's built with performance up and center, and part of that is actually getting on the bike and riding it. And again, not keeping it in the garage, not just washing it and waxing it, but actually riding the bike. And that's it, y'all. So again, thanks for checking this one out. You're going to see a lot of content coming up with this pretty soon. Again, I got a lot of stuff I could talk about with this build that I can't take care of in one video, so we'll have content coming soon about this particular build and this bike, so stay tuned. In the meantime, I'll still be throwing up videos from my FXDX rides as well as my FXR rides. Huge shout out to my FXR, which is going to be my what gets me out here to actually ride this bike so I don't have to bring it through the city. And that's it, y'all. We're going to close it out here. Work hard and you might just get what you want one day. Again, I'm finally at a place with this bike where I'm at peace and I can't really take it further than this. And again, just major shout out to all of you who've been with me from day one with this bike back in 2016. It's come a long way. As always, stay safe, stay low, ride lowrider S's, whether that's a Dyna or a Softail. And on that, FXDLS Brooklyn is out.